Hi, everyone. Just thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us. My name is Scott Moore. I'm the VP of Marketing for PureBridge. I'll be your host for this afternoon's webinar. Our topic is packaging changes for COVID-19 and beyond, enabling logistics for a sustainable, frustration-free, and positive experience. This is part of a series of webinars that we at PureBridge do on parcel insights and parcel performance, many of which are available for viewing on demand in the resources section of our site, along with other videos and ebooks for further insights and information on what we do. Before we jump into things, a couple of housekeeping items. The session is being recorded this afternoon. A copy of the recording will be sent to you by email later in the week when it's ready. We have 2 polls set up to capture your input through the course of the presentation, but if you do have any questions, please feel free to enter them into the questions widget on the right-hand side of GoToMeeting, the interface there. You submit them, we'll glean through them, and we'll answer them at the end of the session. So it goes without saying that these are challenging times with COVID-19 in the US and across the globe. Stay-at-home orders and social distancing has caused a huge spike in online sales as people turn to the internet to meet their day-to-day needs. Although those orders are starting to be relaxed, the impact has been felt and is likely to continue for the foreseeable future as we slowly but surely return to some new normal. So what has that impact been on the supply chain? Well, carriers are facing a sustained holiday shipping volumes. It's forcing them to limit or even refuse certain shippers. The order sizes are increasing, along with the diversity, the things inside of it, that's changing as well. More dense, more fragile, more sensitive. And all along, the e-commerce marketplaces are pushing frustration-free packaging to address cost, waste, and customer satisfaction. We did do a transportation town hall at the end of May on the impact of COVID-19 on shipping and delivery with inbound logistics. It's available on purebridge.com in the resources section. Today, we've assembled 3 panelists to talk to you about innovating product packaging and order packing for e-commerce. We hope that you'll gain some valuable insights that'll help you delight your customers with superior packaging technical design that will differentiate and improve the experience, reduce waste through cartonization processes that will minimize the environmental impact of packing, and minimizing fulfillment costs with an easier fulfillment process at the lowest shipping price. But let me introduce our speakers and get out of the way so you can hear from the real packaging and packing experts. Our first speaker is Bob Malley, the Managing Director of PureBridge and also my boss. He has over 30 years of experience in the parcel carrier management software industry. He introduced the first multi-carrier parcel shipping systems to the market, and he now heads up the company behind Transstream, an enterprise multi-carrier management system. He's joined by 2 of PureBridge's partners. The first is Kyle Aus on the screen here. You can see he's the younger rose between the 2 older thorns. He's the senior manager, packaging optimization practice at Chainalytics. He has experience in retail, food and beverage, durables, non-durables, healthcare, and technology. He leads Chainalytics' ability to support Amazon APAS certification network. He is a certified packaging professional and member of the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, very, very accredited. Our third panelist is Steve Cooper, the Senior Vice President Strategy at Pacurate. He has more than 30 years of experience helping companies of all sizes streamline their order fulfillment processes and reduce related costs. At Pacurate, he is helping companies reduce their carbon footprint, improve their customer loyalty, increase labor productivity, and lower shipping costs. So let's jump into things, and I'll pass things over to Bob from PureBridge to get us started.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. I'll remember the thorn comment. As you mentioned, studies have shown recently that e-commerce grew 50% in April. And I can tell you that just watching our own cloud shipping platform, we saw almost exactly the same kind of spike over the last 2 months, and most of it direct to consumer shipping. And really, there really hasn't been any sign of a slowdown at all. But COVID really just accelerated a trend that we already knew was well underway. Last year, e-commerce grew by 15%, but still only represented 16% of sales. So we knew there was still a lot of headroom for growth, which is what we're now seeing. And it could be the new normal. So an indication of that is what Nike recently reported. They reopened thousands of their stores in Asia over the last couple of months, and which is a market that is well ahead of the U.S. in terms of recovery. But still, the online purchases are up 30%, which says that they're not flocking to the stores as might have been expected, even though they reported 80% of their stores are open. But delivery expectations have changed as well. More employees are shipping from home offices and avoiding contact at local post offices. And certainly we're seeing a demand for, in the form of home office shipping apps. But I recently asked an analyst at Gartner if there was any trend away from the kind of waste that we probably have all seen reach our doorsteps. And they reported that most large enterprises have been trying to differentiate themselves on the basis of what they call customer sustainability experience in the form of, greener packaging and packing. But they also reported that the trend seems to be spreading to medium-sized enterprises who are trying to differentiate themselves with more eco-friendly packaging and packing. So I think the expectations of consumers have changed, and businesses are trying to accommodate. As far as what the changing expectations are for shippers, next slide. The dramatic increase of direct-to-consumer e-commerce hasn't just impacted retailers and e-commerce merchants, but it's also had an impact on omni-channel shippers who provide fulfillment services to e-commerce merchants and retailers, and where they drop ship to consumers on their behalf. Those are 3PLs, manufacturers, suppliers, and businesses upstream in the supply chain. And they've been scrambling to reorganize their operations to support shipping single items or a mixed number of items, each is in a carton direct to consumer, instead of shipping full cases to stores and distribution centers. Now, there's some evidence that they don't do a very good job fulfilling eaches, or we wouldn't be getting so many packages overflowing with fill. And as Kyle from Chainalytics will describe later, suppliers are being mandated to pack properly so that e-commerce marketplaces can ship directly off the shelf to avoid themselves having to pack eaches and risk damaging their own brand and customer sustainability experience. So if the heightened online shopping volumes are the new normal, then omni-channel fulfillment is here to stay. And those retailers who hesitated to implement omni-channel retailer, we can see are falling by the wayside in the form of recent bankruptcies we've seen with J. Crew, Neiman Marcus, Modell of Pier 1, and others kind of on life support. But probably the biggest impact has been on carriers who are bearing the brunt of almost a permanent B2C holiday rush, which has created a capacity crunch for them. And they're the ones probably most impacted financially by sloppy packing practices. The more air that's packed in shipments, the less they're able to cube out their vehicles, and density is their friend and wasted space is their enemy. Omnichannel B2C fulfillment probably is also not the carrier's friend. We can see this from financial reports from the major carriers, which show volumes sharply increasing, but margins decreasing. So and that's because there's less aggregation with B2C shipments. There are more stops and more miles per delivery to residences. So certainly with ship from store, there's less aggregation at the pickup point. One major carrier announced that they'll cap the volumes that they're willing to pick up at retail stores, and really you can hardly blame them. Space is money, and you can't be fully compensated in the form of dim factors. So this is making retailers a lot more conscious about how clerical workers pack orders, particularly shipped from stores. They want to get as many orders on the truck as they can if space is limited. But clerical store workers, many of them temporary, and they're not trained as logisticians, and they need help determining how to choose the right container to pack an order. And certainly cartonization it comes in handy in that regard. And Scott, I think you wanted to do a poll on cartonization. And now would be the time. Yeah. So the selection here is, what is cartonization? A type of instant milk, technology that optimizes e-commerce orders, a freight company that provides turnkey fulfillment services, the Disney's process by which animated films are made, or determining the optimum carton for packing multiple items.
Great, thanks, Bob. I was on mute there for a moment. So we'll jump into the definition. You can take here, and then we'll come back to the poll shortly. Bob, do you want to just talk to the definition of cartonization, and then we'll review the poll after you're done the next few slides?
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll give you a hint. Cartonization is not a type of instant milk. What it is it's really a computational method for determining instantly the most transportation cost-effective and probably air-saving way of packing an order based on a potentially complex set of factors and constraints. I'll explain the algorithms behind this, but I was a philosophy major in college, much to my parents' chagrin. But as I understand it, the algorithms are based on the same type of mathematics that makes video games possible. So, enabling manipulation of objects in virtual space. You can think of it as Tetris for logistics, except that all the thousands of possible combinations and permutations are worked out in milliseconds. So what cartonization does is takes the guesswork and philosophizing out of the equation. As you can see from this diagram, the inputs are SKU data, which are weights and dimensions, available carton types, carrier services and dim factors, and packing rules. And they're passed into an API, and the outputs of that are returned through the same API to a shipping system, order management system, or WMS. But it's the packing rules that are really what differentiate this technology, because they take into account percentage fill, nesting. So if you have objects like cones and packing cones within cones, or don't pack with to avoid damage or hazmat compliance constraints, or pack with, don't stack for reducing damage, and so on. And as you can see from the results on the right side, they're pretty interesting and many times counterintuitive. So tribal knowledge sometimes doesn't help in a packing and pick and pack environment. The decision to pack in one box or many can depend upon the zip code, as destination zip code, as Steve Cooper will point out later. What's most interesting to me about the technology is that if any WMS systems don't take actual shapes or transportation costs into account, oddly enough. Most picking is based on zones and footsteps and time. So you can wind up shipping too much air, which is really what we're seeing in many cases. So when we talk about cartonization, it really should be called containerization, because the same algorithms apply to other kinds of containers. The next slide. In this case, in this example, you can see how algorithms are applied to pallet building, a different kind of container. And why is this important? Well, we can see immediately if it is more cost effective and achieve more density if an order is shipped as an LTL shipment on a pallet as opposed to an aggregate of parcels. This is especially helpful in order entry when it's not clear what the pallet will look like. Customer recently said, with space-based rating, LTL rating, he needs to build the pallet in the first place in order to understand what to quote, and by that time it's too late. So here a business rule like don't overhang or overhang comes in very handy. This is especially important if you use a carrier like FedEx, who happens to be the largest LTL carrier in the U.S. and also ships parcel. So being able to use containerization as a way of determining the best mode is very useful, cost effective, and can help you achieve density. The next example is of container types is for truckload or ocean containers. In this example, we can see that algorithms can be applied to load planning. So this is important for shippers who need to determine how many containers to order and how to load them in order to get the right delivery result. So business rules like center of gravity, wheel well location, or loading sequence is important to aggregate. So, to algorithms for cartons, pallets, and containers really doesn't matter to the algorithms. They're just trying to figure out the best way to pack things into containers to get the best result. Next slide.
Great. Thanks, Bob. So you could really build some optimized loads working the whole process from the carton to the pallet to the container. Our poll results, nobody was really duped by our fun answers. 5% said cartonization is a technology that optimizes e-commerce orders, which I think is fairly true. And the vast majority chose the last answer, which I think is the correct one, determining the optimum carton for shipping multiple items of varying sizes. So let's turn things over to Kyle and the product packaging side of things. So just over to you, Kyle.
Thanks, Scott. This is Kyle here. We're going to take a look inside of the box for the moment. One of the hottest topics in retail supply chains today is Amazon's frustration-free packaging program, just commonly known as FFP or SIOC or PFP. The migration away from traditional brick and mortar towards e-commerce really presents a unique opportunity to rethink or redesign packaging systems for the intended supply chain. One of the common themes behind each of these tiers is the ISTA 6 Amazon test compliant. And so the idea behind becoming compliant is to meet a certain performance threshold for your packaging systems. The spotlight today really is on the SIOC tier 2, which is what you've probably heard as the $1.99 chargebacks and where that's being enforced. The thinking behind this frustration-free program is, what can Amazon be doing to coordinate the supply chain and the packaging systems to enable products to pass through their operations with just a label? And so they've done a pretty good job of outlining what testing sequences and different impacts you need to pass in order to be compliant with their standard. And they've really tightened down on the size of which needs to be tested to the standard. And so any product that is greater than 6 inch by 4 inch is a qualifier to ship through Amazon fulfillment centers in its own container, and that's the acronym dubbed SIOC, or which we call in the industry. There's a pretty clear distinction between these three programs that we're going to talk on today. With PFP being prep-free packaging, you can imagine a bottle of hand sanitizer that might be coming into the fulfillment center that's not at that 6" by 4". And that unit, Amazon historically has had challenges with leakers, right, with liquid products. And so it's a good example, one, because of size, but two, because of the characteristic of the product. And the thinking behind the PFP programs is, how can we minimize prep work in the Amazon fulfillment centers, let alone ship in a box, right? So, they're trying to coordinate the supply chain, move packaging decisions like that upstream to manufacturers, to essentially reduce costs, not just in the packaging systems, but also in performance of the supply chain. And so these programs are really set up to design to eliminate prep, to reduce waste, and then tier 1 to optimize the customer experience and maximize sustainability results. And we're going to take a closer look at some examples in that tier 1, which is the gold standard of Amazon's program, as well as review some of the initial work steps to get pointed in the right direction. This first case study here compares traditional packaging against the frustration-free packaging for Fisher-Price pirate ship. And what's astonishing about the traditional packaging is that it takes 11 minutes to unwrap that packaging system. So from a consumer standpoint, it really is called frustrating, right? That oftentimes, explain the parallel. Everyone drives to work and they experience some road rage. Well, in this situation, we might call this wrap rage, or at least some of my friends in the industry call it. So 11 minutes compared to an easy open frustration-free package at 42 seconds is a substantial change in terms of the amount of time and effort it takes to unpack that unit. Now, remember that these programs are set up to meet a performance requirement, which is a combination of some shocks, some vibrations, compression testing. And so that ISTA and Amazon have done a pretty good job as to tightening down as to what is the packaging and the requirements and the handling methods that we are to expect in the intended supply chain. And so this is just one example of what is being done in terms of making improvements in this space. As you can see, the number of components that you observe here is substantially less, and the size of the parcel is substantially less. And the next slide, we'll take a quicker look, or a better look at what that means from a volumetric standpoint. In this case study, it's a different view if we're comparing the unboxing experience against some of the waste metrics in terms of size and materials used. Logisticians and environments would consider the standard packaging here an epic fail on the left, right? And when you compare this Philips Norelco one blade modified packaging system, or FFP, we're reducing down from 13 components to 9, which is a substantial improvement, as well as meeting some of the recyclability aspects or requirements of that program. The other piece that's worth noting is the size of this parcel. There are no free moves in the supply chain, so closer to striking a balance between size of the parcel and actual weight, the better positioned you'll be for growth, as well as enhancing your business with Amazon's programs. We're often hearing from our friends and family in the industry, and the question that we get is, how do we get pointed in the right direction? And so we've listed out 10 steps here to help fast track this certification process. And it really starts with doing a strong study on your ASINs and classifying those SKUs in your ASINs in your portfolio to get a better understanding of what kind of parent-child relationships do we have in our portfolio, and how many of these do we need to test in order to be compliant with the standards. And one of the pro tips I'd like to suggest today is as you hone in and focus in on the packaging testing that needs to be done, one of the things that can help fast track this process is to gain an understanding of what items are high and low risk in your portfolio, and do some preliminary testing at your own dock to understand if those packaging systems will survive the shock sequence inside that standard. And that's going to give you a pretty good, confidence level or confirmation step to know that you're going to pass when you move to an ISTA certified lab or an APAS lab to do your testing. Because at the end of the day, that costs money, and you can save a substantial amount of time and money by moving through that confirmation step and making a decision at that point. Do we need to redesign our packaging, or is our current packaging sufficient for being SIOC compliant? And so there's some just rudimentary testing that you can do on your own prior to going to the test labs.
Thanks, Kyle. I think that's great insights and great tips for everybody. Steve, you want to dig into innovating order packing now?
I don't want to after that thorn comment. It's more like two roses with a thorn in the middle.
You notice my picture's not up there.
But thank you, and thanks everyone for joining today. We appreciate it. So we talked about cartonization, what it is, why we're doing it, what other aspects of packaging, how does cartonization fit into the FFP or any other vendor who is asking you to ship more sustainable and in a more friendly package. Now, and Bob, as he always does, an excellent job of explaining the API and what needs to be included in the API for cartonization to do what it needs to do. Where in your process, some companies call it the order to cash process. It could be a fulfillment process. It could also be procurement to pay if you wanted it on the inbound. So where in your process is the best place to call or to access the API? Is it, some people access it in their order management page. So they do it while they're creating an order, so they can get an idea of the size of the order, how many pallets, how many boxes. So if they have to do a letter of credit, or if they have to do an estimate of the shipping costs, if it's a B2B to a customer or a B2C, most B2Cs are free shipping, but they do it so they can determine the mode and determine, which I'll get to in a minute, and determine the rate so they can explain to their customer. Do I do it in order fulfillment? In other words, when the order is taken, it goes down into the warehouse, whether it's your warehouse or a 3PL or a drop shipper. Once they get the order and it becomes a quote unquote wave or an order release, in that process, do I want to cartonize the order? So then I can potentially pack to the shipping box as opposed to picking it and then, pick to the shipping box as opposed to picking it to a tote. And do I want to give the warehouse a heads up as to what boxes to prepare for the packer? Finally, in the shipping and transportation piece, there are a lot of companies out there that have a pack verification system where they scan the box and they scan the order and they scan the SKUs going into the box. At that point, would you want the system to choose the right carton for you rather than leave it in the hands of the packer? You can call the API then. And then the final stage is in the reporting and the KPIs. The old saying is, you should never expect what you're not prepared to inspect. So are my rules being applied properly? Are there better scenarios? Do I have the right carton mix? If I'm working with Chainalytics, they would want to use some of this data to recommend the best carton mix in your inventory of cartons. So those are typically where companies call the cartonization APIs, and they can call it in multiple spots. So you could jump to the next one for me, Scott. So scenario 2 is, why do I need cartonization in order to do mode optimization? Traditionally, you could tell by my picture, I've been around for a while. Traditionally, companies would just have a rule, and the standard rule I've heard 1,000 times, if the order is less than 200 pounds, it goes parcel. If it's more than 200 pounds, it goes LTL. Well, that might have worked, 30 years ago, but it's not the greatest way to do it now if you're interested in shipping the most optimum way and meeting your customers' expectations for delivery. So there's definitely a spot for parcel, and there's definitely a spot for LTL, and it's growing. The overlap is growing, not just because the carriers, most UPS and FedEx are two major parcel carriers, also have LTL arms now. It's just the scenario of the way the rating works, and you can't truly come up with a parcel rate without first cartonizing it. So you have to cartonize the order. Probably everybody on the phone call knows that with a standard parcel shipment, if it's 30 pounds, if it's two 15-pound boxes or three 10-pound boxes, the rate's slightly different. And that applies up. So once you understand the cartonization, once you understand the build weight, then you can compare that to your LTL and make the determination as to how you want to do that. Knowledge is power. Have the knowledge, have the understanding of what your parcel rate is, and then understand the LTL rates are complex as well. And then you compare the two valid datas, make your determination, and roll with it, and automate it potentially, maybe. So it takes it out of the hands of the people in the warehouse. Another scenario is with rate awareness. Now, if we're just in the parcel mode, not every zone is created equal. So most carrier contracts have different incentives built in to shipping either closely, depending on where you are in the country. So you want to take a look at your carrier contract. In this scenario, if I'm shipping one order to zone 2, my carrier contract says it's better to ship it in fewer, smaller boxes. But if I'm shipping it to zone 9, I wanted to ship in multiple boxes as opposed to fewer boxes to come up with a lower aggregate cost. So understanding what that is as part of your process is critical if part of your process is shipping the most efficient way possible. So we can go to the next slide, Kyle. I'm sorry, Scott. So scenario 3 is, and this is one that really intrigues me a lot. The packers, there's a weird thing. The packers have two masters in the warehouse. Their job is to get the orders through, so at the end of the day, when the trucks pull out, there's nothing left in the warehouse. Everything's shipped that's supposed to ship, and then the next morning, everything starts all over again. So, but the packers traditionally weren't given much direction. So that's one of the reasons why, you've all gotten it, where you get the cell phone cover in a refrigerator box delivered to your house. And there's some funny TikToks out there about that. Every day there's a couple of hundred more, which are fun to look at. So give your packers some direction. So this way they make the right decision because it's right in front of them. And whether it's on their RF handheld device or whether it's on their picking ticket, in the scenario here on the screen, it tells the packer, for this order, you should use these 3 boxes and put these items in each one of the 3 boxes. They get the best direction, they get what you want, and then when you manage the output of what happened at the end, you can compare that and see that it's happening properly and as you direct them. So don't expect what you're not prepared to inspect, but give them a little heads up and some direction, especially seasonal workers in the warehouse. That's the hardest thing that I've heard in the last 20 years is hiring people in the warehouse to handle the spikes that come with the busy season. And most people's busy season is around the Christmas season, so it's even harder then. But you can flip to the next slide, Kyle or Scott.
Yeah, we're gonna skip the poll and just keep rolling onwards, keep things moving. Go ahead.
So the return on cartonization investment, or ROI, one of the things that we do, all three companies, is we work with our customers and prospects to make sure they're getting the most value out of the application once it's put in place. But prior to that, working with them to understand where are they picking up the savings to pay for it and where are they picking up the benefit. So this diagram here, if you went to roi.shipbetter.com, you can play around with it and it'll give you some estimate as to what your ROI might be and what your savings might be. It comes from lots of different areas. Error reduction by giving your packers and pickers some direction and your customer service people. Cost awareness, am I maximizing or optimizing the contracts that I took so long to negotiate with my carriers? Am I taking best advantage of that? And then the time labor savings by making sure that you don't have to do double or triple work to come up with the data you need to make a decision to let your customer know. We're working with one company now who would ship a lot of larger items and larger orders out, and they would actually have to have their people in the warehouse assemble it so they would know how many pallets it was, so they would know how many trucks to order. And now they just call the API and it happens in milliseconds, and the time and labor savings in the back. But then the big one in my mind, and in all the calls we get, is about sustainability. And sustainability or eco-friendliness, that's really what's behind the Amazon FFP as well. People complain about it. It's hard to put a dollar amount on if I send 24% less volume and then there's 30% less waste. Well, but just about 100% of all the cardboard is recyclable. So am I really saving there? Well, not really. You're saving in the way you cube out the truck, which Bob mentioned, which you cube out the plane, which is all the CO2 that gets pumped into the air that you can that gets saved, and all the carrier friendliness that you're offering. I see our FedEx driver come every day with, these big awkward boxes that have little teeny things in them, and I just feel so bad that those people aren't customers of ours, number one, and number two, that this poor person's breaking their back. So take a peek at that roi.shipbetter.com site, see if that can help. And if you can go to the next slide, Kyle. Scott?
That's okay. I'm going to change my name to Kyle.
I think you should.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. Thanks, Bob. I'm kidding. Thanks, Steve.
No,
so Kyle, you want to take us from here and cover this slide, and Bob, you can cover the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't think of a better way to overcome the COVID-19 carrier capacity crunch than to improve packaging decisions at order fulfillment. Reducing size definitely cascades benefits through the supply chain, and making better decisions at end of line will only improve profitability. Besides the reduced in fees and the packaging costs, you can expect improved sustainability results and service levels using a combination of engineering and technology to advance in your operations.
Thanks. Bob, over to you.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, so I think just to sort of wrap it up, I think we've tried to make clear how, the combination of the expertise, the Chainalytics and technology that PureBridge and Packard bring to the table can help you reduce waste, optimize carrier contracts with, better shipping practices, and enable you to ship smaller orders much more easily and much more efficiently. I think Steve had pointed out all this really translates into a good ROI. So I guess I would encourage you, if whenever you can, to reach out to us and sign up for a cartonization readiness workshop. We have the expertise and technology to assess your current situation and help you figure out how to achieve a better result. So we encourage you to let us help you.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Steve. That's the end of the material that we wanted to cover today. So we'll just turn to the questions, and I see there's a few in here already. Once again, if you do have a question to ask, by all means, use the GoToWebinar widget on the right. You'll see it says questions. I'm monitoring it right now. So if you want to ask one, by all means, drop it in there, or you can send it to any of the email addresses you see here on the screen. Here's the first one. A lot of talk has been about B2C and Amazon. What are the implications for cartonization for business to business? And maybe I'll point that to you, Steve. Would you be best for that?
Thanks, Scott. Got it right this time. So B2C really means residential shipments. B2B would typically mean commercial shipments. So business to business orders are still becoming smaller and more frequent, and becoming more residential, whereas B2C shipments are increasing right along the way, as Bob mentioned, that the COVID emergency has really accelerated the trend of residential shipments anyway. So they're really the same thing, and it involves shipping eaches and shipping properly and shipping respectfully. Now it's slightly different than it used to be a couple of years ago. So they're basically the same thing. So it's impacted equally.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Hope that answers that question. Here's another one. I think probably Bob, you might be best for this. What if we're shipping from non-traditional centers, warehouses and such, maybe directly from stores? How difficult is the technology to implement in that scenario?
Yeah, well, ship from stores processes are still going to be managed by usually an order management system, but sometimes some WMS systems have ship from store capabilities. But I would say the ship from store is even more important for the reasons we stated, in that, carriers are, capping the number of shipments that they will take from stores. And the fact that the store workers are not, trained logisticians, so they need even more guidance and more control over how they pack. So integrating to the APIs is not difficult, and I would recommend that if you sign up for a workshop, include some of your IT folks, and they can take a look at give them access to the API, and they can try it themselves.
Great. I have two more questions. I think one will start with you, Steve. If we know we want it, but we're not sure how or where to implement better packaging and cartonization, so maybe this is best if both of Steve and Kyle answer this. What do you suggest to get started? You want to go first, Steve?
Sure, thanks, Scott. And it really comes down to the cartonization readiness workshop. When we get calls in, or I talk to people, that they understand what they're looking to do, they either don't know how it exists or don't know where it will fit, or they're anticipating that it's going to make a significant change in their SOP, which it won't, unless the company wanted it to. And then the second part of the cartonization readiness workshop, or a critical part, is to make sure that you have the right cartons and the right process for fulfilling those orders and how to package those. And that's where I'll flip it over to Kyle.
Right. Yeah. The rules behind different products as well, and just further comment, Steve, imagine getting a pair of sunglasses with a bag of stainless steel bolts, right? To set up the rules properly and to navigate the technology starts with doing a pretty solid workshop on the front end and laying out some of that, as well as establishing processes for new products being introduced is often part of that type of work. It's not uncommon to start there as a natural starting point. You bring all the stakeholders together to lay out all the requirements and address what needs to be addressed.
I guess I would also add, in terms of how difficult, the API is in the cloud, so there's nothing to install on premise. So you can get started pretty easily with that.
There's two questions here, but I'll combine them into one. The first part is, if you don't know the dimensions of all your items, what should you do? And also, this one just came in, what do you do with a shaped product? I don't know who wants to answer that. Might be you, Steve.
Sure, thanks, Scott. If you don't have the dimensions of all of your products, that's a tough one. The first suggestion would be to put them into groups, and if you could narrow it down to 20 or 30 different groups, no matter how many SKUs you have, that would help. The other thing you could do is rent. I know another one of the PeerBridge partners is a company called Rice Lake Scale. You can rent from them dimensionalizer scale and bring somebody in to go through your warehouse, and in however long it would take, depending on how big your warehouse is and how many SKUs you have, you can get the dimensions put into your item master. And then going forward, when you receive something that you don't have a dimension of, you either insist that your vendors put it in, or you continue to use the scale to do that, or the dimensionalizer to do that. If you have a shaped product, that's the beauty of using an algorithm as opposed to a liquid fill. If you have a shaped product, the algorithm takes that into account, and it allows you to pack. Imagine a shaped product would be a bowl or a cup. So you can nest it or stack it several different ways. So the Packurator algorithm takes that into account. So I hope that answered the question.
So if there's no more questions, I think we'll wrap today. I do realize we went a little bit longer, but well within an hour. Thanks to the three of you guys for taking the time and presenting this material. And thanks also to our audience for signing on today. Keep in mind, look to your inbox for a recording of this session. We also have 2 webinars coming up as part of our Parcel Insight series. We're doing one with Supply Chain Brain on July 14th, and it's on how to quickly ramp up your omni-channel e-commerce fulfillment game with a warehouse in a warehouse. We'll be presenting with our sister company, Microlistics, a WMS provider. And later in July, we're still settling on the date, we'll be hosting a webinar on the 3PL parcel plays in the age of COVID-19. Thanks again for joining us, and we're signing off.